Welcome back to the table, everyone. Today we're going to take a look at Admiral of the Fleet. So this is a new set of naval rules. They've been out now for a little while, and I've just been very bad at getting some words out. I don't know if I want to call this a review, more of an overview. And I want to go over why I think this is a worthy addition. So the first thing is, I'll just say that I did find this on Wargame Vault, and my first question was, why would I pick up another set of naval wargame rules? So if you have seen the channel at all, we've talked about naval wargame rule sets. I like World War II naval warfare. I'm not a studied historian in it or anything like that. It's just an interesting genre to me. So we've played some General Quarters and the new Victory at Sea with the miniatures. And we've looked at some other rules. There's the effing shear and some other rule sets. I like Naval Thunder. And so I was really thinking, I've got so many, why would I need this one? And so a story, here's story time. You can skip ahead a minute or two. I was talking with a buddy of mine, and I told him, hey, why don't we make a war game? We can take out all the parts of the game we don't like and put in all parts from different games that we do like and just make something. And he's like, well, the thing is, if you make a game, you got to have something that sets it apart, makes it unique. What would be the wow factor to make you buy another rule set? And Admiral of the Fleet has that wow thing, which we will talk about. Now, that might fully come in a whole other video as well, because this one might be me stream of consciousness rambling for a little while on the naval warfare aspect. So let's hop into the book and kind of do an overview of the book first. So again, these were the PDFs sent to me by Rich, and it's from the Sea Krieg folks. So I've never played Sea Krieg. That's one rule set I haven't, among probably a whole bunch that I haven't. But Sea Krieg being one of the big ones, I haven't played. And so that was another reason why I was like, ugh, do I want to get into Sea Krieg? But this is not Sea Krieg. And I think for those that are familiar with Sea Krieg, you'll find this might be of interest. Or if you've never played Sea Krieg, this might be the time to hop in. Let's talk about it. So this covers fleet actions from 1880 to 1945. So that will cover well into your World War I and your World War II needs. And as we pop through here, we'll just kind of go through it. So there's a table of contents, saying hi from folks there, forward, and a list of game charts. Now, I will say this, I found this to be very interesting. I had a conference call with Rich from Sea Krieg, and we talked for a while, and going over different things of the game, he sent me an index of charts from Sea Krieg because I had talked about that. I was like, well, now that I've seen this, I'd be interested in learning more about Sea Krieg 5. And he was like, yeah, sure, let me send you over a couple sample things to look at. So here is a list of game charts from Admiral of the Fleet. Modest. In fact, we'll look at them. I printed them out, and I wanted to try this. I don't know if this will work the way I want it to, but I'm going to pop out of this. And I'm going to go over here to here. And I was going to print these out, but it was a lot. So here is a Sea Krieg charts appendix. So we saw from Admiral of the Fleet, one page of reference charts here, game charts. And here with Sea Krieg, you're going to have several pages of index of some of the charts. And then here's a sample. Fire control system data, types of projectiles. They have the Beaufort scale of wind velocity and sea state codes and armor types. So there's a lot more than this. Again, this was just some samples that he sent me. And there was also, speaking of some charts and stuff here, I thought this would be interesting to share. They have weather data tables for weather. So based on different types of different places in the world, it just amazes me when I look at it now going, yeah, they actually have a lot of charts. So Seekrieg, that tells me it is very detailed beyond what my imagination was, put out there. So if we come on back here to Admiral of the Fleet, we have a lot fewer charts. So here's the charts right there. So if we look here for just a second here at some printout charts, I know you want to see more, but I figured since we're here, we'll just talk about it. Here's some flag command rating. Yeah, so the gimmick here, I don't know if you want to call it a gimmick, right? But the thing that really sets Admiral of the Fleet apart is they have a flag system. And it is phenomenal. And we'll see that in the books. And then, like I said, I'll do like a separate video where we talk about cards and kind of lay them out a little bit. Crew rating determination, signals lost or delayed, gunnery modifiers, overconcentration penalty. Some of this is pretty standard for like most games, which is great. This right here addition is probably what you wouldn't see in a lot of games. Some games I know have flags and signaling. You're thinking, what's innovative about that? Well, I think as we get going a little bit further here, you'll see that it's pretty innovative. And then when we do the separate video where I can lay the cards out for you, you'll see, oh man, it's awesome. They've done a super good job with the cards. But these two charts then let you know how many like commands that your person can lay out, like your admiral. And then here, as you're taking battle conditions, you actually start to lose how many like flags you can set out. Your ability to communicate starts to degrade. And then on the back here, some damage of flotilla ships, damage to flotilla ships, because ships, once they get to be like a certain size, torpedo boats and stuff like that, they go as a flotilla, so it's not just individual ships. So this is doing damage to those flotillas. Gunfire damage, flotilla versus flotilla. Torpedo hit probability. Torpedo hits, we'll talk about in torpedo tracking. It's done interestingly here. And I won't do a tutorial because I have a lot that I want to talk about, and you know me, I ramble. But very excited about torpedoes. And then here is what a lot of people like, the gunnery charts. This is it. Gunnery chart comes on like basically these two. I'll show you this here in a second. But here's a torpedo dud, torpedo damage table. And then here, again, I'll show you this. It's pretty cool. Pretty amazing what they've done for gunnery here. I think I've got some charts. I think I got a couple that I didn't pull out that I'm missing. No, it's pretty much all here. Yeah, I think we're good. But here's the gunnery. But with the full Seekrieg, there's a lot of gunnery charts. But what we've got here is two, and what they've got here is pretty much your gunnery charts, but put into a condensed chart. So instead of having even several charts, you can do all your gunnery from here. It's very cool. And we'll kind of go over those here in a second. But that's pretty much it for charts. It's like very chart light. So basically the way I look at it is, if you take Seekrieg, and that's going to be to really get detailed if you have a few ships per side. All right, it's going to be super detailed. But this game takes like Seekrieg, the essence of Seekrieg, really streamlines the game and makes it so you can do larger battles, right? Jutland type of stuff, Tsushima. Really get in there with lots of ships. And then, if you're doing World War II, again, you could do smaller battles with it, like, Battle of Denmark Strait kind of things. But the idea is you could do like convoy raids and have, several ships attacking like a convoy that's got a bunch of ships. It's designed for larger scale stuff. And I think that's pretty cool because you do get some of your granularity and your detail in combat with the charts, like if you prefer the expanded gunnery chart. So it still has that kind of Seekrieg feel to it, but it has streamlined it quite a bit so that it's not so densely packed. It allows you to play a lot quicker. All right, so if we just keep flipping through the rule book here, So you got an introduction. Now there's a lot of pictures in here of just things that are very, naval inspired. Obviously we're talking like a World War II thing. So here's like a compass, and I'm like, yeah, I'm used to north, northeast, west, but yikes, they've got this down. It really makes a person realize how not familiar they are with sailing and things like that. So I love seeing things like this. Here's a sample of a ship log, which I have a couple printed out, which we can look at here in a moment. I know, we could look at it now, but we'll talk about it more here in just a little bit. Just excited to get through some of this stuff. So here in the beginning, you got the introduction to the game, talks about signaling. And again, that's what makes this game, to me, really cool, is the fact that this signal system is integrated in such a way that it replaces the need for, say, conventional writing down of orders, pre-plotting and things like that. The flag system really lets you put flags out that kind of read what needs to happen, and then the people that are, like you have the admiral sitting it down, and then the people that are in charge of like the divisions of ships, they'll have to interpret those orders as best they can. So it's very cool. And in here it talks a little bit about that, where you have miscommunications. Maybe someone wasn't very skilled in sending up the signals, and then maybe the person interpreting it. So it was as perfect as a science as it could have been. It was still very fallible through human error. People are people. But it talks a little bit about that. Get into game scales here. Basically, it's scale agnostic. Like, you can play with any scale of ships that you want. Here it had like some samples on table sizes. And I think this was like in feet, if you want to be super realistic in scale. So I know a lot of people play like the it's not 1800, what is that scale where it's like 18,000, I think it's the 18,000, where it's like the pretty big Axis and Allies type of ships. That might even be wrong, but I know like 2400 is what I have. 3,000 some folks have, right? But it's like, oh no, so that's way small. Where's the 1800? It's right below here. 1800. Yeah, 18,000 would be a really, really small ship. But on the 2400 scale, if I'm reading it, see, it's like minimum table size in feet for battle ranges. So like if you have a battle range of 40,000 yards and you're playing at 2400, it says you need 50 feet of table. So you really can get this down to scale. And it talks about the importance of scale. I never really thought of it before. It's something I've talked about in other videos where you talk about like figure scale to terrain scale, especially with naval warfare. Basically, these ships really are just kinds of specks of nothing when you get them out into the ocean. And when I was playing and experimenting with scales, like a scale I would want to play in, I found the 6,000 scale of the scales I had, available to me. 6,000 made the most sense, but you don't get to see any kind of details on the ships. They truly look like little blobs, so if you stand back a few feet. But the problem is you get to, say, the 2400 scale or larger ships, yes, you can see the detail, they look wonderful, but then the scales are super abstracted to where it's not realistic to some degrees to play on like a 6x4 table. You need much larger tables to accommodate for scale. But we realize that's not realistic, and so the rules here mention the fact that, when you have to compress those scales, then you end up with maybe models overlapping when in reality they're still very far apart from each other. So I really appreciate the fact that they kind of explain that in here and then showed realistically what you would need to play on like almost a 1-to-1 scale at some degree. I don't think anybody's really going to play on a 1-to-1 scale, but it was interesting to see. So if you wanted to fit it onto a 6x4 table, then yeah, you would need to play at the 1/18,000 scale. I almost wondered what that would be, and I guess it would probably be very, very small little dots. You say, oh, here's a ship, here's a ship. They'd be lined up. Anyway, I just thought it was neat. Scale, 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 scale. And another picture showing your port sides and things, how they break down, how you look, I don't know, view. Okay, then we get into the rules. Now, so one thing to keep in mind is that we haven't really discussed rules a whole lot. So far, it's mostly been an introduction to the system, and you're about 6 pages in to where we actually start to take a look at rules. It says page 8. So page 9 actually starts. So that's the other thing too. This is not a heavy book. We're talking when we get to the end, 20 some odd pages. It doesn't take much reading to get through. Again, I think that's another streamlining effort. Most of the work is going to be handled by your primary gunnery chart or the 1-page gunnery chart, and then your ship logs to track the different damage and stuff that you might run into, which is what I didn't print out. We'll look in here. There's actually a section that talks about all the different damage results you can get, and probably if I was going to play a big game, because I don't have a whole lot of models. Like, I have enough that Sea Krieg would probably be more realistic for the ships that I have than this. So I just had it up on my PDF. But we'll take a look at the damage logs. They're pretty cool. In fact, that's the part I'm getting excited about to get to. I have to get through everything else first. So it does talk about the ship log sheets. So we could take a look at those. And it breaks them down really nicely. Like the gunnery angles, the guns, tracking damage, the different informational parts of it, hit locations, the gunnery fire control system, penetration tables, armor protection. So there's a good section right here talking about just the ship. Alright, so if we take a moment, then we'll pull out a form. This is it. The Sea Krieg 5 forms, which Rich sent me a sample, we'll pull up for comparison, is double-sided. Everything you need is here. And even though the game is streamlined compared to Sea Krieg, I think there's still enough crunch here for a casual to medium gamer could still feel like there's detail here. So don't think that this game, just because it's not Sea Krieg detailed, that it's not detailed. I mean, here we've got a nice display showing the weapon layouts, and you've got here, which I thought was cool, not only do you have port, starboard, forward, aft, you've got kind of the mid arcs where you can see the amount of barrels that overlap. So if you can, without me zooming in too much, like this is showing me, this is the Pensacola, and it's got 2 barrels, 3, so that's 5, and 5 there. And then you got your secondaries. And what's cool, what I think is cool, is you can tell based on arc how many barrels overlap. So only when you get to the complete port and starboard side do you get all 10 barrels on target. Otherwise, at these off angles, for some ships, they're not going to get all of the front or all of the back side because, if they're not in those super firing positions. Then it's got a gunnery determination, your range, how many gun directors there are, your fire control radar bonus, and then you've got penetration tables based on, range, horizontal, vertical penetration, and then the secondaries have similar information. Down here, keep track of damage, so as you take damage, it will affect your speed. Now, I like this. If you hit an engine room, there's like 2 engine rooms. If you hit an engine room, you're going to go from 32 to 18. And then once both engine rooms are gone, you're done. But if you lose some propeller shafts or boilers, you still will lose some speed, but I liked it. It wasn't overly complicated to follow, but it has detail to where it's like, oh, interesting. A propeller shaft was hit. and it affects me this much, versus if I lost a boiler room. It's just, I'm just so intrigued by the amount of detail in this not overly detailed game. And then over here, damage control, your protection, hit locations. What's pretty cool is, when you are being shot at, and based on range, we can tell if the shots are dropping on you or hitting. It's basically hitting from the top, or is it going to hit the side of the ships? And here at like long range, there's a 39% chance that it could drop on the deck for checking against your armor values. There's damage control. As your ship loses damage control, it starts to take even more damage because the crews can't firefight. You have flag command ratings, so again, as you start to take certain damage, you lose your flag control and you can't send out as many messages. And here's a big chart here for tracking which hits you've taken damage-wise, and you can mark down like what turn. And again, gunnery records, so you can track your targets. So everything you need really to run the game is just on those handful of charts and your ship data card. Okay, again, not a tutorial, but just highlighting things that you're going to run across. And it is very amazing. When we get to the damage part, I don't know why I'm so I do know why I'm fascinated with damage, and we'll talk about that. So again, you got a section there that breaks down the ship forms. Then it goes into command phase, using the flags. There's actually a separate book you can get if you want. Like when we talk about the flag system, if you like the flag system alone, you can get just the flags and buy a flag book that tells you how to use the flags. And you don't have to buy Admiral of the Fleet. So you can get the flags and put it with your own, whatever game you're playing. It's that good. Okay, so then we get into movement, just normal stuff. Talking about your move segments, how many degrees you can turn. Emergency turns, got formation speeds. I want to say standard stuff, all naval games you got to move. And then the combat gunnery phase, that's where things get very interesting for me. And this, how they do it here in Admiral of the Fleet, is where I'm saying it's like just a fraction of what you get for Sea Krieg, but it still gives you quite a bit of detail. So for example, again, without being a tutorial, I don't want to bore you completely with this. Maybe one day we'll do a little tutorial, but essentially you're going to, based on your sheet, you have a couple things that you'll do to determine your gunnery, what I call the fire control solution, your FCF. And based on that, which is like how well you are able to detect a target, you have an FCS through here up to 20. So let's say after you've looked at the range and the speed of the target, and you've just factored in, maybe you have an FCS value of 6. Okay, we're just going to say 6 arbitrarily. Then what you do is, again, take a look at your chart over here, and you're going to see how many barrels are on target, and you'll just compare. Now, when I was looking here at the firing, trying to get back here if I can find this real quick. Let me find this, what I was looking for, real quick. We'll come back here. I want to, again, not a tutorial, but I wanted to get this one part I wanted to show you here real quick. Okay, had to grab my percentile dice. I knew I was forgetting something. Where were we? Oh, yeah. So, again, not a tutorial, but just to show you that there is still some detail here that you might be familiar with from Sea Krieg, but maybe streamlined for efficiency. So let's say, for example, we go back to that Pensacola. Now, the Pensacola has a rate of fire based on range to target. 7 at short, 6 at not quite as short. I mean, one could almost call that point blank, and then short, and then 4, a rate of fire of 4. Now that's per gun or like barrel. So remember, if I've got 10 barrels over here and something is at short range, let's say this up to 8,000 yards, that is 6 shots. That's 60 shots over a period of time. That's a lot. These are pretty fast firing guns, right? And even like the Japanese cruiser here, the Maya 10 as well, rate of fire of 8.642. So further out, you're not quite getting as many shells in the area to roll for, but like you're like, oh my gosh, that's a lot, 80. Well, here's how the gunnery works. So once you know your rate of fire, this is probably going to go to sleep. You take a look at your gunnery salvo resolution. You're going to break it down into groups of 20, up to 20. So let's say I was shooting close enough to where I had 80 shots to worry about. Let's do 60. Let's say the Pensacola at short range, 6 times 10, that's 60. This isn't too bad. So remember, we said we took our fire control solution, we just picked a number. It's probably better than this. Let's say we're at that short range. Now you got to pick, is it broad or narrow perspective? So if the ship is totally lengthwise to you, that would be broad. If it was like head on to you, that'd be narrow. So let's say it's broad and it's going at 25 knots. So that's an FCS value of 12. There would be a couple other modifiers, but let's just go with the base 12. So what I'll do is look at the 12, and because we're firing in groups of 20, and I know I've got 60, I'm going to flip it over here to the 20 side, and I'm going to go from that 12 down here to 20. Then I roll my dice. This is a percentile range. The lower you roll, the more shells out of that salvo will hit, up to 4. So for example, here I'm going to roll. I rolled an 87. That means out of that first 20, none hit. Out of the second batch of 20, a 47, which lands in the 31 to 68, 1 hit. And then the last batch of 20, I rolled a 25. And again, go down to 12, and that would be 2. So out of 60 shots in that rapid fire, 3 hit. Then you would just have to determine, based on range, there's a hit location. So if I was shooting the Maya here, since we're at short range, I just want to see if it was horizontal, so like dropping on the deck, probably pretty low that happening, or vertical, so like the side armor. Since I know I had 3 shots, there is a chart here where it can roll kind of all that into one. If I remember where it's at. One of those things where it's like, oh yeah, let me see if I've got that chart handy. But it would determine that for you, like how many of those shots went where into one die roll. Oh yeah, it's right here. I was looking at it the whole time. So salvos on targets. Like if I had 3 and we're at short, then I just rolled a percentile, 27, and then it tells me right through here on 3 that 0 hit the horizontal, but all 3 went vertical. So again, if you didn't want to roll all the dice, you know, like maybe you had more than 3 hits, you could roll individually, or to save time, check on this one chart and it will tell you kind of mathematically how many would be vertical hits or how many horizontal. Also, see, this is one cool thing about this other gunnery chart. So that's what I was saying, is you have that feel of Sea Creek, but it's been streamlined, but you still have that sense of detail. So let's see here. Here's the FCS chart, the Fire Control Solution chart. So again, you have the nice big one that I'm sure is looking familiar to people, where you take your FCS solution, check it against the number of shells in the salvo. But what they've done is they've also made it here on this chart condensed, where they've just put all the numbers on one row. So for example, if I had that FCS of 12 and I was doing groups of 20, I could roll down here and this is going to tell me what my hits are. You know, you just do the same thing. So if I rolled a 90, nothing hit. Then the next batch of 20, Okay, that time I rolled a 16, and I just looked to see, well, 72, 34, 11. So I got 2 hits out of that batch. I guess you're still kind of rolling individually there, but it's just instead of having the big charts, it's all right here on this little chart. A little bit easier to find what you want. You know, either one is fine. But okay, now you've got a hit. You need to know what damage you've done. This is the part where, like, I thought was real fun. Yeah, sorry. It's one of those things where you just really want to share it with folks, and where you might be thinking, I don't know, that just looks very overly complicated. But see, here's why I think this is super exciting for me. Torpedoes we'll come back to in a second. In here is the damage phase. This is the part that stood out to me as being what probably sets this apart for me as a game. There's no hit points for the ships. And I want to get down and show you. Here, let me go find the right thing here for you. Here it is. The damage charts. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit for this. This is the part that really sells it for me. Okay, so we just did a little bit of rolling to determine that there was like 3 hits, and they hit the vertical. But here's the thing. If your shell penetrates, it's a class 1 damage. If the shell, if you look here, the damage that I have here based on this gun is penetration. Where's my penetration? Here it is. Vertical is 15. Depends on range. 12, 8. And then here's the armor. So this is something that I thought was like, there's not much armor on these cruisers. Hard-hitting guns, but little armor. So very rarely when I was playing, I never really did not ever not penetrate. So shots were always going through. But if a shot hits and doesn't penetrate, there's a class 2. Okay, so what does that mean? You have classes of damage. And this is the part I've been waiting to get to. I absolutely love. There's no hit points on the ships. That's what I was trying to show you. There's no hit points. There's no, hull points or anything like that. What you do is you're going to take damage based on description of damage. So for example, one of my hits, okay, they're all going to penetrate. They're all class 1. Everything went through. So the first one I rolled at 84. And there's a spot right here, 84. So I took this, and I would just write down, took this on turn 1. So I'm going to find 84 here in my charts. 84 is a 113. If you look right here, 84 to 87 is damage number 113. So I'm going to look over here for 113, and then it says there's a description. 1 secondary battery, turret, or gun mount is out of action. Permanent damage. So I could roll for one of those secondaries. Maybe I was hit on the port side. I could just determine which of the secondaries. So we'll say, oh, I lost that secondary. Super terrible. Roll to determine location of turret gun mount affected. Then it says permanent damage to 1 secondary battery director. For the duration of the game, all guns controlled by this fire control solution are 1/2 of the value listed on the gunnery FCS table. Oh, that would be bad. And there's even a spot to track directors. So that's what I really wanted to share. This is the part that really got me excited about this, was you don't just simply say, okay, you had 3 shells penetrate, you took 20 damage, for instance. This is all descriptions of damage. Now, there is, when you take a little bit, they do have tracking your damage control rating, which can go down. And there are some things you can mark off, like if you lose an engine room and things like that, right? But there's no hull point, as in saying you hit 0 hull points and you sink. There is, if you take a certain amount of engineering hits between boiler rooms and whatnot, that your ship could sink. But again, it's not just simply based on an artificial, your hull points hit 0, the ship sinks. You actually have to hit the ship and do internal damage, and there's a possibility with enough internal damage that your ship is just out of action. Okay, so I lost 1 secondary gun there, and fire control solution. All guns controlled by that fire control are half. And then there's, as you can see, quite a bit. It's like a role-playing game for ships almost, with this narrative description of things. And then it's also got it based on torpedo, if a torpedo hit. And torpedoes, let me tell you about torpedoes for a second. Let's look at a couple more damage charts first. Like here's one. Description. Progressive loss of power systems due to flooding. On each of the following 3 game turns, roll to determine status according to the following. On turn 1, a roll of 0 to 35% loss of power to all main battery guns in sections 1 through 3, and it just goes on from there. So it gets very detailed, like it actually tells you what the problem is. So in a lot of games, when you start to take a certain amount of hull damage, it says, okay, well that affects your gunnery in this way, or it affects your speed in this way. This is telling you how that's happening. You understand it. Loss of power, loss of power. Flooding in a boiler room. A boiler room is permanently out of action. And then you just cross off a boiler room, for example. And now I know, boop, that my speed has dropped down to 34. Apparently it says boiler room 9. This Maya has 9 boiler rooms. But as your ship is taking damage, you actually see what the damage is. And to me, that is super fascinating. Okay, so that was the part I was really excited to get in and show you guys, is if you are interested in playing a game with some detail, but as you can see, it's not overly complicated. I am probably explaining it in a way that isn't as eloquent as the game actually is, but it should give you a pretty good idea that it's not that bad, but still gives you that feel of detail. That's what I love. And torpedoes, just to briefly talk about torpedoes, they're a little streamlined too. They kind of go on a system of, you're going to pick like your bearing, and if your ships don't deviate, your target ships don't deviate, then there's a good chance that they'll hit. But if your ships have turned, then they will probably miss. The idea was you could, as in some games, really sit down with like a protractor and really guess where the enemy ships will be versus angle that you fired, speed. And this kind of streamlines torpedoes out just a little bit. Again, it's all in an effort to help speed the game along. Now, I just clicked on something by accident here, but here's like a ship listing for a scenario. This is Dogger Bank that you get with the game. And one thing that, when I first got the PDF, the concern I had was, where are all the ships? Like with Sea Creek, people are probably really used to seeing lots and lots of ships. Here, your ships are based on the scenario that you are playing. So you'll have all the details, all the ships that you need detailed out. And there's a lot of World War I scenarios. There's like one World War II. And if you've got, a good World War I selection, that's great. But that was my concern was, okay, what if my miniatures I've bought to do certain battles? And so just as a side note, they do have for you, just came out recently, or it's about to come out. Let's see, here it is. They have a Naval Annual coming out. So this will include ships, fleet actions, ships from 1885 to 1906. And then they'll have other annuals that come out, later on out through the rest, all the way out through World War II. So this was the first one. And inside these annuals, you're going to have your listing of ships. So here, Argentina, I don't see an index here. This was like just a sampler, but you'll have like by nation, right? So Argentina. So if you're, it might be a little while before you get all your World War II ships, but leading up to that, here's Argentina for those years. Here's Austria, Hungary. And again, this is a sampler, but you're going to have like variations of the same class. Here's Habsburg. I can't pronounce some of those. Kaiser Franz Joseph, Catherine und Königin Maria. I can't pronounce these things, so I apologize. But again, just a sample, you're going to get a lot of ships in these annuals. So that I thought was worth sharing to you. And then, again, kind of going back between the difference between this, how it's streamlined between Sea Krieg and Admiral of the Fleet. Let's take a look, for example. This was the Maya cruiser, heavy cruiser from Japan. And then here was the Lion class battleship. This is what it looks like for Sea Krieg. It takes a second to load because it's a lot. Now this is front and back, but it's 2 sheets with a lot of detail and information on both. So I appreciated being sent this because I thought it was real important to go ahead and share the idea of complexity versus streamline. And it was very interesting when I was talking to Rich, because Rich said that when he plays with people that have experience playing Sea Krieg, and then they take a look at Admiral of the Fleet, they're like, oh, I want to try Admiral of the Fleet because it looks like a more streamlined system of this. We're getting the same similar realistic results, but with a lot less paperwork. And then when he played with people who had only seen Admiral of the Fleet, and then they look at this and they're going, oh, interesting. I want to see how this is done with the detail. And see, that's where I'm at. When I saw this, and I was like, well, this isn't so scary. Sure, there's some dice rolls and charts, but when you kind of run through it, it's really not that bad. I mean, you saw I was able to determine relatively quickly out of 60 shots, 3 hit, 3 penetrated, and then I would just make 3 damage rolls and see how my ship is affected, and we move on to the next person. Great for large battles. But I'm like, I want to do Battle of Denmark straight. This is where I would be interested, like really get into the nitty-gritty of how the ship tables are done, and you track all of that. So he said it was just interesting to see how the game translates each way easily. And, so I thought that would be cool to show you. Here's an Admiral of the Fleet, and then here it is with Sea Krieg in comparison. And here was a Lexington class. Again, just another example. This was the carrier. It even has that similar layout to show you where all the weapon systems are. Probably would have to zoom in on that to see it better. But again, lots of detail to track. And then we had the Naval Review. That should be out or very close to being out. We looked at some of the charts and the weather data. Yeah, so Sea Krieg 5, I want to get into that just because I want to see the detail go the other way. So from streamlined to super detailed. And then with Admiral of the Fleet, you get a lot of PDFs that come with it. Now they did send me the Flag Officer book also and the scenarios. The scenario book comes with all the ship logs. The rule book, if you just get the rule book, is pretty much just the rule book, some turn rulers, and I think you get like a little signal book for tracking signals that you write out, and the card deck. I'm going to give you a sample of the card deck, and then the other video I make, I've got them printed out, and we'll look at them. But this will probably be where I end because I've rambled on quite a bit to show you, try to show you everything to give you an idea of what this system is. And it's a system because that one annual I showed you is the first of many. So your favorite ships will be there, and you will be able to do smaller battles, not just bigger battles, but you'll still be able to do smaller battles, but with detail. So here's a look at some of the cards and the way the cards work. What's so cool is that they give you like a number, 2 for example, so you can lay out instructions down to individual, numbers, tens, hundreds. And if we just flip through, just randomly pick one, boom. It's a maneuver, turn in succession. Now, here's what it would look like realistically or historically. But when you read through the history of flags a little bit, you'll learn that there are hundreds and hundreds of flags revised over many years. But here are like 2 common representations of a turn in succession order. And then it even gives you a description on how that would play out on the table. Order ships to begin a turn to port or starboard. And guess what? They have a flag for starboard or port in the direction and number of degrees specified, following in the wake of the lead ship. So this is what I was saying, these cards, just a teaser for the cards, is if you lay your cards out right, you could say things like Division 2, make a port turn in succession, this degree, and go at like this speed, or something like that, which is pretty cool. And then your buddy who's reading the cards will then have to start maneuvering the ships based on his interpretation of the order. And it's cool. You don't have to know the flags themselves. If you were worried about that, you could just strip the flags out and just have the instructions. The flags really are there for flavor. So that's just a sample of the cards. But you get cards that you can print. They also sell the cards individually, professionally printed, that you could use. Now that is the only thing I'll say, is you would need a set for each overall admiral, right? Not per division, but your fleet admiral person will need a set of cards, and then your opposing player, he'll need one for his side. Otherwise, if you just print them out, cut them out, you got 2 decks of cards right there. So that's just a sampler on the cards. So let me go back real quick to the main rule book. We'll just kind of wrap up there. Again, it was not a tutorial, but I really wanted to rip through here and get you a feel for what's in the game. Now I'm getting down here, 12 pages, 11 pages. Oh wait, did I open the wrong one? Oh, that's near the back. Here's some of the charts. These are what I printed. I just went to the back of the book and just hit print and printed out the tables, and that's everything you need to play the game. And yeah, 32 pages of rules. So once you start getting into optional rules, so 30 pages. And again, like I said, once you take out the first several pages, which are like an introduction to the system, you're looking at around 20 pages of rules. That gives you a streamlined, detailed naval warfare system. Well, there is a stream of consciousness overview of Admiral of the Fleet. So I hope that gives you an idea of what's in the game, gives you an idea of how to play certain aspects of the game, and later we'll take a look at the flags and the signals themselves and kind of talk about my thoughts on that. But otherwise, this was a long one, so I hope this gives you an idea of what's in there. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll talk to you later.